And thank you very much for the report and putting up with me now. The question today is, should regulators crack down on Wall Street bonuses? Two congressmen join us now, Democrat Peter Welch from Vermont and Republican Peter Roskam from Illinois. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Mr. Welch, I know you want to have even greater taxes on bonuses, but I just want to ask you about this bank tax that's out there. Isn't this, as most economists believe, just going to do more damage to consumers and potential borrowers because as the cost of the tax will be passed along to them at the end of the day, doing more harm than good?
Well, you know, the basic question is who should pay for the cost of the bailout, the folks who caused the problem or the taxpayers? And I think the president puts accountability right where it belongs, and that's on the big banks. Henry Paulson did come in on his knees to Nancy Pelosi and asked for $750 billion. So I think it's appropriate for the banks to pay that back.
But I mean, like Larry just said, and maybe we'll let Representative Roskam take a shot at this, that's not who's going to end up paying it if this is how we rectify the situation. You're just pushing up the cost of capital. They're going to push that on to consumers. I mean, it just means if you get a credit card or a mortgage, it's going to cost you more. The taxpayer is going to pay for GM if they don't pay the money back one way or the other. How is that not the case?
Well, you know, that's a very convenient argument for the banks. They cause the problem, and then they say if you make us pay for our sins, then we're just going to pass it on to the consumer. Bottom line, they're setting aside in their bonus pool about $100 billion to $160 billion this year. They made that because of taxpayer generosity.
Then why not tax their bonuses? Wouldn't that be more direct? I mean, if that's what this is really all about, and we know it is, why not forget this other fee, call it what it is, and just go ahead and tax their bonuses?
Well, I do favor taxing the bonuses. I mean, my bill, which is getting a lot of support in Congress, would tax 50% of the bonuses above $50,000. And that money, incidentally, would go into small business direct lending. There's two issues here. One is how much greed the individuals where will they stop? But second, and really more importantly, we need a banking system that lends money like to Vermont firms and firms in Peter's district who want to create jobs and create wealth. And if bankers are simply investing and going into the casino, then they're turning the purpose of banking upside down, and we've got to encourage them to get back to the old-fashioned ways.
But Mr. Roskam, Peter, let me ask you this. Suppose Mr. Welch gets his bonus tax. I don't see how that by itself would extend any more credit to borrowers. That's the disconnect that I see.
Right.
Punishing bankers. And by the way, I would just say editorially, I myself think the bankers made a big mistake. While they were tarped, they should not have paid bonuses. So I acknowledge that the bankers made a mistake. But let me take Mr. Welch. How does taxing bonuses over $50,000 or whatever extend more credit or more loans? That's the part I don't get.
Well, I think we need to make a distinction here and go back to December 9th when Secretary Geithner wrote to Congress, extended the TARP authority, arguing that the credit markets still needed more support. And now, ironically, it's almost as if this administration is doing audible calls at the line of scrimmage. Now they're pivoting and coming up with a different strategy, arguing that the credit markets are fine and it's time to raise taxes on them. Let's assume President Obama's argument for the sake of argument, and that is the people that benefited should pay. Well, this bill doesn't do that. This bill taxes people that didn't take TARP. And it doesn't tax people that were the beneficiaries of TARP. For example, the autos aren't in this. Fannie and Freddie aren't in this. And I think ultimately where Peter and I agree is the notion of making sure that credit is more available. But where we disagree is I think that if you raise this tax in this capricious way, ultimately it's not going to create more credit.
Mr. Welch, can I just follow up on what Peter Roskam just said?
Yeah.
Fannie and Freddie CEOs, they're going to be paid $3 million each, and some analysts say that their deal would permit them to make $6 million each. Why aren't Fannie and Freddie in this bank tax bill? Why aren't you yourself saying how awful and ridiculous that is? You want to talk about somebody in the middle of the financial maelstrom, Fannie and Freddie. There you go.
I think two things. One, there isn't a consistency. So that's a stiff salary. They should not be getting paid that. I would agree with Peter. Second, Larry, I want to get back to your point. The revenue generated by my tax on bonuses would be dedicated to the SBA direct lending program. So that's how it will provide credit. You know, the big banks that got the bailouts have reduced lending by $11 billion to small business, and that is a killer for us in Vermont.
But is that a function of lower credit demand, which is what most economists think?
No, you know, some of that, obviously, in the collapse in the real estate market, but some of it is performing loans where the bank has a problem, not the business. I've got construction companies that are 3 generations. They've been paying their bills, performing on the loans, but the bank calls the loan in because they have problems on their own balance sheet. And that's not right. That's a bad downward cycle. We've got to get credit out and have Vermont bankers...
No, go ahead, finish your point, I'm sorry.
Well, we've got to get credit going again, and that's the whole point here. Bankers are making too much of their time and money on investing, derivatives and commodities and currencies. They ought to be going back to helping communities, helping businesses that create jobs, create wealth.
We've never...
Although they're in business for their shareholders.
We've never used it. Peter Roskam, I guess we got to get out there. Mr. Roskam, just a last word. We've never used tax penalties and tax punishment to regulate before. I mean, this opens up vast new horizons, which I think are rather gloomy horizons. There are so many better ways to stop over-borrowing and over-leveraging, aren't there?
Well, and I think that this is ultimately an administration that is desperate to change a conversation. They have an underperforming stimulus package. They've got a ballooning debt and deficit. The public is enraged, and so now the playbook is, let's demonize some folks and point a finger.
All right.
Okay, we got to go. Thanks to both of you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, up next on the call.